Well, g'day curd nerds. Today we're making Wensleydale with cranberries. Well, as some of you probably know, Wensleydale is Wallace and Gromit's favourite cheese. And it stems all the way from Yorkshire or Yorkshire in England. Depends on how you want to say it. I'm not quite sure how Yorkshiremen talk, but this cheese the recipe comes from Yorkshire. Anyway, so this is a variation on normal Wensleydale. I have put in cranberries into the curd. There is no sweetener. The cranberries were sweetened. The only other ingredient the cranberries had with them was sunflower oil, I believe, just to stop them from sticking together, but they were sweetened cranberries. So hopefully a little bit of that sweetness comes through in the cheese. I have made Wensleydale before. It takes a long time. So just be warned up front, this will take you many, many hours. So start early in the morning and you should be finished by about dinner time. Anyway, let's get on and check out how we made Wensleydale with cranberries. So I'm using unhomogenised milk from Inglenook Dairies, and cue the appropriate Wallace and Gromit music. So the ingredients are 10 litres or 10.5 quarts of whole cow's milk, at least 3.4% fat, and can be higher. An eighth of a teaspoon of Aromatic Mesophilic culture. I used Flora Danica. Half a teaspoon or 2.5 millilitres of calcium chloride, diluted in quarter of a cup of cool non-chlorinated water. Half a teaspoon or 2.5 millilitres of liquid Rennets. I used single strength. That was diluted in quarter of a cup of non-chlorinated water. 1.5 tablespoons of non-iodised salt. And 3/4 of a cup of dried sweet cranberries. Very essential to this recipe. So heat your milk up to 30 degrees Celsius or 86 Fahrenheit. Mine was just a little bit over, but that's okay. It cools down. And I'm just giving that a stir to make sure the cream is incorporated before I move on to the next step, where I'm adding the Aromatic Mesophilic starter culture, the Flora Danica in this case. You can use any Aromatic Mesophilic starter culture. This is just the one I had on hand. Now this varies a little bit from my normal Wensleydale recipe. I think I used just a Mesophilic beforehand. I'm trying something a little bit different because I have seen in other recipes that they use Aromatic Mesophilic for Wensleydale. So I'm giving it a go. Hopefully it'll produce a more buttery feel in the mouth to the cheese, and it'll still be a little bit crumbly. Okay, we're going to allow the starter culture to rehydrate for 5 minutes. So 5 minutes later, we're going to give that a stir and stir that through the milk. So a good stir, that's for about a minute, maybe a minute and a half there. Just going to check the temperature before we ripen the milk. So it has crept up a little bit. It's at 31 instead of 30 like it should be. So I'm going to take it off of my double boiler pot there. And you notice a little toothpick that just lets the steam escape between the two pots. So we're going to cover that and allow it to ripen for 45 minutes at 30 Celsius, 86 Fahrenheit. So it's acidified enough that it'll allow the rennet to do its thing properly and coagulate the milk. So just stirring the cream back in there before we add any other ingredients, taking any bits of fluff that shouldn't be there and removing them from the milk. So give it a good stir. Okay, I'm just going to check the temperature before I do anything else. You can see that's dropped down a little bit, which is great. That's just perfect now. It's about 29.8. So So just the right temperature for renneting and all that sort of stuff. So we're going to add the calcium chloride solution first. So stir that while you pour that in, and then stir that for about a minute. Get that incorporated into the milk. The calcium chloride helps set a better curd when using pasteurised milk. So we're going to add the rennet to the milk now. Just slowly pour that in whilst we're stirring. There we go. And give that a stir for no more than 1 minute. Otherwise, it may disturb the curd set. Okay, so we're going to cover it. And we're going to let the milk set for 45 minutes at 30 degrees Celsius or 86 Fahrenheit. So we're just going to check now for a clean break. It looks fairly solid, which is good. Just using my pinky there, and it looks a little bit sloppy, so I think I'm going to wait for another 15 minutes. And just let that set again. Could have cut it then, maybe, but I'd rather wait. So 15 minutes on the clock, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes, but just depends. Now we're just going to check for a clean break now using my trusty curd knife. And that's perfect. Absolutely lovely. Nice little clean split there. I'm going to move on and cut the curds into 1.25 centimetre or half-inch cubes using my trusty curd harp. And with done the horizontals, now I'm doing the verticals with the vertical curd harp. You can use a knife, cut the curds, and to get the horizontals, cut at a 45-degree angle. So we're going to allow the curds to heal for 5 minutes at 30 degrees Celsius or 86 Fahrenheit. So they've got a little bit more firmer, I suppose, and you can see a bit of whey has floated to the top, or the curds have sunk to the bottom, one of the two. So we're going to gently lift the curds and cut any large pieces with the side of the spoon, just as we're stirring the initial bit there. So do this very gently in case the curd decides it wants to fracture if you haven't got really good quality milk. So it all looks fairly good. So we're going to slowly raise the temperature to 32 Celsius or 90 Fahrenheit over 2 hours, and we're going to stir that very gently. So this is 1 hour later, and you can see the curds are fairly small, which is good. A lot of whey has been expelled. I'm going to continue stirring for another hour. So 2 hours later, you can see the curds are fairly small. They've shrunk a lot. So this is what makes the Wensleydale a slightly crumbly cheese. We'll just check the temperature there. Make sure I got to the 32 Celsius, 90 Fahrenheit mark. Yes, I did. Perfect. So I slowly heated, very, very slowly. It was only a couple of degrees. So don't just go straight to 32 at the start and keep stirring. Just do that very slowly over that period. So cover that and allow it to settle for 5 minutes. So it makes it easier to pour through the cheesecloth. And over to the sink area. And we're going to pour that through a cheesecloth lined colander. You can save the whey if you want to, but I've chosen not to there. There's only so much whey a man can drink or use. Okay, so we're going to tie the edges into a bag shape. And we're not going to hang it or anything like that. I just want to make sure that no beasties are on it while it's draining. So just going to tie that up. There we go, that looks lovely. Now we're going to let that sit there for 15 minutes. Let it drain. And it will consolidate into a single curd mass. Now, this is the part that takes a long time. So every 15 minutes for 2 hours, we're going to open it up and break the curd into thumbnail-sized pieces. So as you can see there, I'm breaking up the curds with my fingers, just making them a small size. And we do that every 15 minutes for 2 hours. So it takes a while. So this helps dry the curd out as well. And then at the end of that at the end of breaking the curds up, we just tie it into the bag just to protect it again. Now you could simply just put a lid over the top. It's no big deal. The bag doesn't apply any pressure to the curds or anything like that. So let that drain for another 15 minutes and then keep going through the process until the entire 2 hours are finished. So 2 hours later, now I kept the curds warm by keeping some warm water in the sink, and that did help keep the curds warm. So at the end of the 2 hours, I'm going to transfer the curds into a large stainless steel bowl, which I've slipped underneath there. And you'll find that the curds don't mat together anymore, near the end anyway, because they've dried out a fair bit. Just break them up loosely with your fingers. Clean hands, of course. Now we're going to add the salt. So we're going to sprinkle the 1.5 tablespoons of salt over the top of the curds. Find the half measure, Gav. There we go. So this is non-iodised salt. I find that the iodine in the salt, if you do use salt with iodine, that it does kill the action of the lactic bacteria. So that's why we use non-iodised salt. So any kind of sea salt or anything like that would be fine. I tend to use fine grade salt. Some people use coarse. As long as it doesn't have iodine in it, it doesn't really matter. So just mill that through. And any big bits, just break them up. And then on with the next step. So we're going to mix in the cranberries. So there's our 3/4 cup. Now I'm just breaking them apart because they were like in clumps. So I didn't want clumpy cranberries. I wanted individual cranberries. So I took the time to break them apart before I went on to the next step, which is mix them through the curds. So I'm just mixing them through until they're thoroughly mixed through, so you can see, that there's an even distribution of cranberries there. There's no point going through this exercise if you've got all the cranberries in one lump of curds. So just make sure it's all distributed nicely through the curds. Very nice. Looks good. So make sure that you've lined your basket with a cheesecloth again. And then we're going to fill our mould with the curds. So just ladle them with your hands. That's what I should have said. And then just pop them in there. There we go. Lovely. And pop the follower on top in a second. Now, first of all, I just pull the cheesecloth down so there's no wrinkles. Put the follower on top and then put it into your press, and we'll lightly press at 5 kilograms or 11 pounds for 30 minutes. This is just to form the initial rind. So 30 minutes later, we take it out of the press. And the whey should be running fairly clear. If you overpress it, you'll find that the whey runs cloudy and then you're losing too much of the fat from the cheese, and that's no good. So be very gentle at this stage when you unwrap it. And you can see that it's not entirely knitted together, so it's very loosely formed together. Some bits are actually falling off. If this happens to you, maybe don't turn it over. Maybe press it for another 30 minutes. But if you're gentle like I am there, then just slowly turn it over. There we go. Very gentle. And we're going to press it again at 22 kilograms or 50 pounds for 12 hours. So this was overnight for me. So I'm just fully closing the spring to get 50 pounds of pressure there.
Cool. So leave that overnight at room temperature. So the next day, just remove the cheese from the press. Now, I found the cranberries had swollen, absorbed some of the moisture from the cheese, which is fine. That just took it a little bit harder to get out of the mould than normally would happen. So it has formed a rind, so we're just going to turn that over and just do the final pressing, redress it, pop it back in the mould and press it 22 kilos, 50 pounds for another 12 hours. Now, because it's got a lot of fruit in it, it does need a fairly firm pressing to get the curds to knit together and hold all that fruit together as well. So once that final pressing's happened, we remove it from the press. And take it out. Now, this was very hard to get out. The fruit had swollen up even more. So the rind should be fully closed now. No bits should fall off. It looks really good. And that extra pressing, that extra 12 hours, certainly does help close the rind up and get the fruit consolidated into the cheese. So we're going to place it on a mat, bamboo mat, and we're going to air dry that for until it's touch dry. So for me, it was about 2 days. Yeah, it dried out fairly quickly, this one, because the curds are fairly dry. Now, you can wax or vacuum pack this cheese for maturation, and I'll vacuum packing there, as you can hear. And we're going to ripen that at 13 Celsius or 55 Fahrenheit for 3 months in your cheese cave or cheese fridge, whatever you have to ripen your cheese in. So once it's all sealed, which it does, it'll actually hold the cheese together better too, and keep any moulds off of the cheese, which is great because this doesn't have a natural rind. So this is how Wensleydale is normally matured.
Wensleydale.
Well, there you have it. That was Wensleydale with cranberries. As I mentioned at the start of the video, it takes a long time to make this cheese, but that's how you make this creamy and lovely crumbly sort of cheese that has an amazing flavour. And hopefully the cranberries will just add a little bit of extra something to the Wensleydale. Now, I got the idea for this video from the Cheese a Day challenge, where I tasted real Wensleydale with cranberries. So I thought, why not make it myself? I have a successful Wensleydale recipe. So join me for the taste test for this one. This will be at the end of June 2019. Anyway, you can get the kit for this cheese over at littlegreenworkshops.com.au. Check out the hard cheese kit. It has the moulds and, the basket and the cultures for this cheese and some of the equipment. Anyway, thanks for watching, Curd Nerds, and I'll see you next time.